Good evening, this is us, Scotland at 7 at Broadcasting Scotland, and with me is Chris McCusker. My name is Ellen Hoefer and we'll be having a look at the news today. Alex Salmond has appeared in court today, having been charged with 2 counts of rape and 9 counts of sexual assault. In a statement outside of the court, he's refuted absolutely the allegations of any criminality. Maybe, Chris, how should we proceed?
We should obviously proceed with extreme caution and let the process go through, and what will be the outcome will be the outcome. As Nicola said, it's wrong to presume anything at this stage.
I agree. The other news that we've had to contend with today, after this issue was raised over and over again in First Minister's questions, the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital took centre stage at the FMQs. This was following 2 recent and very sad deaths of 2 patients, and there has been an announcement made by Health Minister Jean Freeman, who said that she was calling for an inquiry into the design, construction and the maintenance of the hospital.
Yeah. What we have to bear in mind is that the Scottish Government have done quite an amazing thing, because in years gone by, the hospitals in the Glasgow area were sort of like, there was quite a few of them. You know, there was at least about a dozen. And what they've gradually done is they've closed these old hospitals down to make one big super hospital. Now, at the time of building it, I'm sure they took in various amount of facts and design innovation at that time. However, I don't think they countered avian outbreak, shall we say. But can't lose sight of the fact that it is a super hospital. It is one of the biggest hospitals in Europe, and although we can't belittle obviously the deaths that have been encountered here, I think it's a bit disingenuous for certain parties to try and make a political point score out of you know, obviously quite a tragic incident. You know.
Considering that this is Europe's biggest hospital, and given that it's a hospital environment and there are always risks of infection, isn't it part of the game of medicine, having to counteract these risks of infection?
Well, of course, yeah, and it's obviously it's worthwhile to note that whilst people are in hospital, they're at a very low susceptibility to even more infections. In saying that, obviously, in Jean's announcement earlier on today, she's not hiding behind the curtains insofar as she's instigated a full inquiry into, you know, the wider ramifications in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. 2 lives have been lost here. Obviously, that is an unfortunate thing to happen in order for action to be taken, but it is better to take action at that point instead of trying to minimise the damage that has been done.
Correct, yeah.
I think on all fronts, fighting infection is one of the major topics of our time, especially considering how less effective the current ways are becoming on fighting these.
I don't want to go into the as I said, you know, the anything to do with health, I personally believe that it should be separate to politics. However, I can't get away with the fact that Richard Leonard belittled himself in trying to score a political point out of it, because let's not forget the Labour Party didn't exactly cover themselves in glory with the whole PFI scandals of, you know, hospitals and stuff like that, and the fact that Scotland is going to be paying for those hospitals for the next 25 to 30 years because of the PFI schemes surrounding them, and in actual fact, some of the car parks that are attached to the hospitals, because of the PFI system that they're in, some of the car parks still have to charge people, and that's down to Labour policy.
We'll have to see how this is going to be continued to be treated, as far as we can see, with an inquiry being conducted into the design and the maintenance of the hospital. It seems like we're taking the right steps in order to understand what has happened, what went wrong, and how this can be counteracted.
Well, again, it's worthwhile to point out again, and I think Jackson Carlaw alluded to the fact that there's going to be this mythical amount of extra money which is coming to the health budget after Brexit. I would love to find out his workings for that, but people have to realise the fact that the Scottish Government are working under severe constraints.
And I believe that is also the case for the staff at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, who are charged with not only taking care of the patients, but there's a whole system around it that concerns maintenance, where a deep clean has to be conducted, where there's very high standards.
But as I was saying, that people have to realise the fact that, you know, because of Westminster austerity, the cut to Scotland's budget has severe ramifications for all of Scotland's devolved competencies, whether it's housing, whether it's health, or whether it's even the benefit system that we're trying to set up as well.
Scotland's budget is impacted both by the Brexit proceedings and what is happening or isn't happening, the insecurity surrounding all of that, but also the policy of austerity that has been impacting the country for a long while now. I believe that today Nicola Sturgeon, as the First Minister, answered a question regarding this and said, yes, but our government will continue to put specific focus and additional intent to support, both financially and in ethos, more of NHS Scotland's undertakings.
The other point that the First Minister constantly says, these people that are asking for money to, you know, for this, for that, the next thing, you know, both Nicola and Derek Mackay have said, well, you tell us where you think that the money should be cut from, and then we'll, you know, enter into discussions with you. You know, because nobody comes up with, you know, the Labour Party and the Tories, the Lib Dems, they're all saying, you know, we need more money for this, that and the next thing. But they're not telling where the money's coming from. They're not willing to, you know, put their head above the parapet and say where they want the money cut from. Do you know what I mean? And
seems very similar to the council budget game,
well,
where each has their own ideas about what should and shouldn't be cut. The reality of it is there's a bottom line and it needs to be executed to a degree that makes it able to operate.
Well, that's correct. And funnily enough, actually, I've seen the 5 minutes of my life that I won't get back at the Liberal Democrat Party political broadcast the other night, and Willie Rennie was saying that you know, the true meaning of a Liberal Democrat was to be fair and balanced. And I'm trying to think, what's fair and balanced about asking for extra money for, you know, and not actually identifying where it's coming from. You know, it's all very well, you know, carping from the sidelines. Do you know what I mean? But unless you actually come up with a costed plan, then there's no real point in asking for extra money. Everybody wants extra money.
I think in that way, all political parties and instances currently face the same issues. It is very difficult to come up with a costed plan for anything in an environment that is so deeply shaken and insecure in an economic,
well, again,
deeply impacted way.
But, you know, unless they actually wake up and accept the fact that we're living under real austerity, you know, because the Liberal Democrats, the Tories, the Labour Party, they don't seem to accept the fact that Scotland's budget year on year has been cut. You know, so I mean, you know, if they're like a horse with blinkers on, you know what I mean? They can only sort of like go the one way, and that's just the nature of politics, I presume. You know, I'm sure if the shoe was on the other foot, you know, but to be honest with you, I don't see Labour or Tories ever controlling Scotland, let alone the Liberal Democrats.
We'll see how that goes. In any case, whoever is in power has to be taking the responsibility for the numbers and the prospects that they provide. The Scottish government has been doing quite...
Yeah, and Nicola does that time and time again. And well, the one thing that baffles me, you know, when I watch FMQs or if even when I'm watching Parliament TV, that you know the Scottish National Party are in Westminster are the only ones that actually talk up Scotland. And in Holyrood, obviously we've got our friends in the Green Party. But the rest of them have this mantra that we are too wee, too stupid and too poor. So, you know, we should just sit in the corner, suck our thumbs and just wait for what's coming down the line. You know, that is basically their
It is not a very powerful message, and I can see how this would be perceived by a lot of people across the movement, across this country. It's going to be quite difficult to reunite people, even in Scotland. We see a similar spirit across the UK with the Brexit referendum, I believe, but there have to be more positive and more inclusive messages that carry us forward, and obviously with something like this, with health and the instrumentalisation of incidents that are so tragic. There's two people who lost their lives. Nobody intended for that to happen, especially not in a hospital where the professional staff is spending their lives saving lives. It's obviously a very difficult topic, but I still wonder what it is that Scotland can do to find a better path that is less based on opposition to each other and finding a middle ground.
Well, you see, I mean, the wider ramifications of that, and make no bones about it, I fully expect that when Scotland does go to the polls for another independence referendum, because of the implications of Brexit, I would say that we should be around about the low 50, mid 50 mark. You know, and whilst we achieve that, we can't be complacent, because it's the democratic right for the other side to put their case. Now, I would not decry any pro-union activists to state their case for the union. That's up to them. But what we've got to realise is that, you know, I mean, since 2012, we've been making the case for an independent Scotland. You know, and they've asked us all the questions. You know, you tell us why you know you should be independent. We've got to turn that narrative round, and we've got to say to them, no, you make the case for the union now. Do you know what I mean? And we'll listen. But, you know,
I think that's an interesting point, especially if we compare the figures of NHS Scotland to the NHS numbers for the rest of the UK. We can see quite a strong case for why people would want Scotland to be the place where they will be treated in a hospital. Anyway, let's try and move on to the next piece. In the run-up to Brexit, there has been a number of companies announcing they're leaving, and another one big blow came today when Airbus announced today that its UK operations were on a precipice. The Dutch government also has made clear that they are in talks with about 250 companies, and these companies are all looking to move their operations from the UK mainland over to Europe. So we'll have a little look and see what that was causing as a talk within the FMQs today. There was a specific question, and we've got a little clip for you to show.
Maureen Watt, to be followed by James Kelly.
EY's new report this week showed that every single one of the Scottish businesses and trade associations that it consulted has concerns over Brexit. They highlighted risks to competitiveness, profitability, and in some cases, even their survival. For the sake of Scottish jobs, isn't it high time the Tories ruled out no deal?
First Minister.
Well, the EY study that Maureen Watt refers to was stark, although it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Concerns about the implications of Brexit have been long-standing, but are growing with every day that passes. And of course, there is a growing concern about the prospect of no deal, and that is a concern that could be removed by the UK government if they decided to take no deal off the table and say that they simply would not allow the UK to leave the EU with no deal. Mike Russell and I, when we met with the Prime Minister and David Lidington yesterday, again made that case, and the Prime Minister refused to do so, as she refused to really listen to any of the concerns that are being expressed across Scotland and more widely. So it is time for no deal to be taken off the table. It is time for a request to extend Article 50, and it is time to put this issue back to the electorate so that people can choose not to have Brexit at all, so that Scotland and hopefully the whole of the UK can stay within the European Union.
Interesting.
Isn't it just? This is quite an interesting question, and obviously there's quite a lot of companies by now that are on the list. I think we've made a wee graphic here. Let's have a look. So currently the ones, and this is just an excerpt, these are the ones that are already saying that they're moving part or all of their operations away from the UK. That's Jaguar, Parasonic, Dyson, P&O Ferries, Deutsche Bank, Lloyds Bank, Smithies, Sony, AXA International, Diageo. We can see quite a lot of distinct areas within this.
Well, one of the most interesting for me in that list is Diageo. Diageo is one of the major distilleries in Scotland, and that's actually quite frightening. Now, I mean, it's realistic to say that there will always be bottling plants in Scotland. However, if you look at the last 10, 15, 20 years, bottling plants have become less and less and less because they've actually, you know, due to automation, they've actually changed the way that they actually bottle. So from that point of view, Diageo bought up quite an awful lot of the small independent distilleries, and there are more and more distilleries popping up on a month-to-month basis. And it's not just whisky; it's gin as well, Scottish vodka, I believe. But it's worrying to think that Diageo would be sort of like, I would presume that it's headquarter type offices.
Vodka
that they
production
would
is one of the mainstays as well.
Yeah. So the other one, I mean, Dyson, you know, was a great Tory
This is quite a funny
donor.
one. Let's be honest. Dyson is being led by somebody who was all in favour of Brexit and is now having to use.
Correct. Yeah. But the other thing as well about Dyson is the fact that Dyson obviously didn't pioneer the actual domestic Hoover, and you know that was an old British company, if you would like to call it that. You know, back in the day when Hoovers were standard uprights, and you know, I mean, he's just finely tweaked the concept of a Hoover and put in a smaller machine.
Do you know about where he's moving?
Yeah. He's moving to Singapore.
And you know what's interesting about the Singapore thing? Singapore has a trade agreement with the EU.
Yeah, and also the fact that Singapore has its own banking system as well, which is obviously very appealing to certain Brexiteers, the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's moved some of his businesses over to the Republic of Ireland, I believe.
That's convenient.
Very convenient.
Yeah, I think in the lineup of these companies, we really see very distinct areas, and these are not small to medium businesses. These are massive companies, and companies that stand for quite a lot. The financial companies are moving both to a lot to Dublin in Ireland, and also to Frankfurt and to Paris. There's been a huge increase in housing around Frankfurt since Brexit, and this town is growing massively. The same is true for Ireland. I think Ireland finds itself quite well placed at the minute to find themselves vying for space for all the people that are queuing to come and move their business to another English-speaking nation within the context of the EU that already has highly skilled workforces with multilingual abilities.
Yeah, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Although Nicola didn't exactly say it, I think she stopped short of saying it. But I don't mind carrying on the statement. I'm sure that she would agree that if Britain delivers a no-deal Brexit, that basically makes Britain a vassal state. Do you know what I mean? And that is the. I think that's the end game for the Brexiteers. Do you know what I mean? Because it's for them, it's not a race to the bottom; it's a race to the top.
Yes, it's a wild, wild west scenario that suits those close to neoliberal policies down to a T. Yes.
Yeah.
And Scotland at some point will have to decide whether it wants to be on board with this.
Well, not Scotland. The citizens of Scotland will need to make they need to make a concerted effort to avoid being dragged into this vassal state. And the only way that they can do that is to ask the Scottish electorate, you know, what do you want? Do you want to live in a vassal state, or do you want to live in an inclusive European international country that, you know, is open to trade with Europe, as we always have done? I mean, bear in mind that the back in, what is it, 18th century and stuff like that, Scotland was trading with France. We were trading whiskey, and we were also trading in seafood as well, oysters and the mussels and the likes and stuff like that. And we were getting brandy back from France, and you know, and cheese and stuff like that, and all the rest of it, and claret, you know. So I mean, we've always had an old alliance trading with Europe. And interestingly, I was at an event during the week there, and the councillor Tony Buchanan of East Renfrewshire Council, he often goes to Brussels, and he was making the case that every time that he goes over, the Europeans are all too aware of the state that Scotland is in, and they're ready when they can legally do so to actually sort of like offer their hand to Scotland. But Scotland, first of all, has to make that choice. Once Scotland makes the choice, then I believe that the EU will just open their arms.
We'll see how that plays out, because obviously the EU has already in the last couple of years heavily struggled with independence movements, and how that comes about as the forming of a new nation within the European context. But I would agree, I've been observing the European media quite closely, and 2 days ago there was an absolutely spot-on, fantastic article in one of the German newspapers, Die Zeit, about Scottish independence, and that there is now a potential for this to take place in the context of Brexit. And it's for somebody who's quite intent on looking out for these kind of news, these seem to be piling up at the minute. We're getting them from all over Europe, and in very clearly and strongly worded terms. So it's very interesting to see how there's a shift, and how Scotland potentially can open the door to have a better system even within the EU to accept and understand how the democratic path to nationhood as member state can be shaped and taking place in a constructive way rather than an aggressive way.
In the last couple of years, it has been said that there has been a few independence marches in Germany and in the Netherlands as well. And these are organised by EU nationals who are sympathetic to Scotland's case, you know,
yes.
So there is wide good feeling there. But maybe some of the people back home might not have taken this into account. Is that the EU are they've got a round of elections coming up as well, so they're sort of like, do we include the Scottish MEPs? Do we include the English MEPs? Do we, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously they've got their systems to sort out as well.
Yeah,
you know.
I think
first and
that
foremost,
whole discussion.
They have to obviously look after their own house before they think
absolutely, and then that whole discussion
else.
kind of very neatly fits into the Brexit discussions that are going on at the minute. Extension of Article 50 is obviously something that the EU has already opened the door to, but quite recently, I believe it was Juncker. Was it Juncker? I'm not entirely sure who it was, but somebody said that, you know, we have EU elections happening in May, and there doesn't seem to be much sense in either extending Article 50 beyond May or have the UK participate in these elections, because they need to make a decision. There's a huge infrastructural effort behind conducting these elections in 28 nations, soon 27. So at some point there has to be a very concrete measurement on this, and I think for Scotland this is the time to ask these difficult questions and insist on what it needs.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Right, let's move on to the last topic of the day, which is that on Sunday, on the 27th of January, is Holocaust Memorial Day. And this is an occasion where we will see the UK bearing witness to those who have endured genocide, to honour the survivors and to pay respect to all those whose lives were impacted. Any plans for Sunday and how you're going to participate?
Plans for Sunday, per se, for myself, I'll spend it on my own. I have wonderful, if I can say wonderful in the context that we're talking. I was in Poland about 3 months ago, and I made the visit to Stutthof, which is about an hour's drive from Gdansk. And Stutthof concentration camp was originally for Polish dissidents who were obviously rebelling against the communist state. And when the Germans obviously moved in, they quickly turned it into a concentration camp. That is the first time that I've yet to visit Birkenau, but that was the first camp that I was ever in, and it had a profound effect on me to be up close and personal with a gas chamber, to be up close and personal with an oven. It brings it all into context, and it's something that I personally think should be in the curriculum of every school. I remember when I was at school, we covered the atrocities, the pogroms, and it's. I think they introduced it gently, but I think for my mind that I done a heck of a lot of research when I get back, because I wasn't morbidly fascinated with it, but
it is a very human topic that requires you to develop yourself.
Well, yes. And I think that, you know, I mean, obviously in every context, knowledge is power.
Yes.
And I think that the more you research into what actually happened and how. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a byproduct of fascism, and that's something that people sometimes forget. This is one direction, and where the right-wing racists can subject people to untold horrors, and it honestly leaves you speechless.
Well, as a German, I have to say I agree with many of the things that you're saying, both in terms of school education, because I don't recall going for a single year in school without talking about the genocide, about Nazis, about how people were still and are still impacted by this in their lives. There was not a single year, and you wouldn't believe in how many different topics. It wasn't specifically history. It involved English, it involved German, it involved history, it involved geography.
Yeah.
We have, often Germans are accused of having a guilt complex about this. I think at my level, at this generation, I'm third generation after the war, I don't feel guilt, I feel responsibility, and that is because I will be spending my Sunday going to volunteer and volunteering within the UK, within Scotland, within the migrant community that is at closest risk of being turned into the scapegoats of fascist attempts.
Yeah.
I think from what I remember talking to you previously, you are also quite involved in social causes, and have your own third sector organisation that you volunteer with a lot. So.
Yeah, and funnily enough, actually, Eastwood Refugee Aid we're doing our latest humanitarian mission to Cali to help our friends at Care for Cali, and on the. A shameless plug, but on the Saturday the 2nd of February, we will be at the Scout Hall in Pollock Shields. I think it's Glencairn Drive, and in conjunction with another refugee group, SAFR, they have kindly organised a collection for us, and hopefully people will be bringing warm winter coats and warm boots and socks and stuff like that. Personally, myself, I've arranged for to get some vegetables. I think I've got a friend who has a kebab shop in Newton Mearns, and he's going to take me to his cash and carry, and we're going to buy some rice and some oil, and so that we can put it all in the van and take it over, and we can help these poor refugees who are still displaced by the French government. Well, ultimately they're displaced by their own country. Let's not forget that.
They're migrants that are displaced no matter where in the context of the world they are. Yes.
Yeah, but again, the country that they find themselves in are refusing to help entirely. A couple of years ago, they at least facilitated the camps, although they were very basic and they were not ideal. At least they were allowing them to have some sort of roof over their head. Now there are no camps in France, and the police are actively taking they're taking personal belongings off them, and their personal belongings are their sleeping bag, their tent. The police are actively taking these off them, and where they are erecting tents, the tents are getting slashed, and it's just an absolute nightmare. I could go on at length about it, but going back to the Holocaust. One other thing that we need to mention is the fact that Holocaust is still happening today. You've got to remember about the situation of the Rohingya people as well. And these are despotic governments who are creating this situation, and they're not learning from history.
Absolutely, and in that way we have a responsibility not to forget to
Correct,
commemorate
yes.
these
Yeah.
occasions. You can only learn from history once you understand what the history means. And while we might not spot the same signs of Holocaust as we should have spotted back in the day, we now have the opportunity to see where in other occasions, both in other countries and in our own, these kind of structures take shape in society and threaten the overall well-being and safety of its citizens.
Yeah, but I mean, whilst you and I can learn, and you know, I mean, bearing in mind I'm 50 plus and I'm still learning, you would think that it would be in the realms of capability for other governments to learn from the past mistakes of other governments.
I absolutely understand where you come from, but the point is, this is why it is more important to feel responsibility than it is to feel guilt.
Of course,
doing something in the community will pull people after you, and that's why your project with Eastbridge is fantastic. And while investing your time and your effort is more important, or is just as important as honouring these occasions, remembering these people whose lives were lost in these horrible and tragic ways, we can turn it into something more constructive, something better, and something that leads by example, and that is getting off our own backsides and making it happen in our own communities.
Oh, correct. I mean, there's nothing worse than burying your head in the sand. You know, I mean, lessons have to be learned, but the right of, well, I find that sometimes I find there are certain people who are not openly hypocritical, but they, in their actions and in their words, you know, I'm thinking about Theresa May, the whole hostile environment thing here, and yet, you know, they're turning around and saying, you know, oh, we've got to pause for a minute and, you know, and remember the victims of the Holocaust and stuff like that. Yeah, but hold on, let's pause for a minute and remember the Windrush generation. And do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's not just one thing that we should just pause and think about.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We should pause and think about everyone who is, you know, at a disadvantage because society plays them a dirty hand.
And this is directly related to human rights and how the Prime Minister of this country has been considering axing human rights, while at the same time instigating celebrations and commemorations of occasions like this, where it is difficult to keep a calm mind, but this is why I am so focused on trying to repeat and repeat again. What we can do in our communities is not only be aware, but to do our own thing.
Well, no, I think it's to your credit. Do you know what I mean? And you know, and I find it commendable. That you know, I mean, I learned from my son that his girlfriend, while she was going through school in Poland, is that all the Polish schools go to the closest camp so that they can hands-on learn about it. Do you know what I mean? And it's not shied away and, you know, in the back of a cupboard as a dirty secret. And I think that's to be commended because, you know, it's not, you know, one specific day in the calendar. You know, it's remembered and it's taught all throughout the year. And that obviously helps drive down the right-wing way of thinking.
Well, you'd like to think so, but Poland is another country that is very much struggling with the right wing of its political arms, and I don't even think that this is due to lack of education. This is more due to a lack of respect from the international community and the countries immediately surrounding Poland. National pride gets taken when there's no respect being given. I mean, it was I think it was last month actually, the mayor of Gdansk actually gets stabbed. Yes.
And that was down to two right-wing neo-Nazis. So you know, I mean, it is prevalent, and I don't think that, you know, anybody could totally eradicate the you know, right wing, left wing. You know, it's all the yin yang thing, but you know, countering it is one thing, but being mindful of it is something completely different. And I think if you can, although it's going to be ever present, I think if you can do your best to avoid it, then, you know, that's, to my mind, that's a lesser of two evils, you know. But as you quite rightly say, you know, the work that the Eastwood Refugee Aid do, it tries and sort of like redresses that balance, you know, and just by reaching out and having a wee bit of empathy, you know, to people that, you know, are less fortunate than yourself. Do you know what I mean? I mean, someone asked me, you know, the other week there, why, you know, why would you do this? And I said, well, look, if somebody was bombing the Donald Duck out of the south side of Glasgow, surely you would move to the north side. Right. You know, to, you know,
absolutely
avoid it.
And surely you would hope the international community would be watching that and would be outraged and do their very best.
Yes.
And not just from a governmental point of view, but ordinary people in ordinary other countries coming to help. It's the right thing to do. Yeah,
yeah, because at the end of the day, you know, the clue is in the descriptor, and the descriptor there is humanitarian. You know, and it says it at the start.
Absolutely.
We're all humans.
I don't know if we spoke about this before, but I used to do quite a lot of volunteering work with different organisations, and one of the incidents that I remember was with Refugee here in Glasgow that welcome refugees into Glasgow and try to provide basics, like if they arrive in the middle of the winter, you will need some gloves and a coat and, you know, maybe a scarf, and somebody writes you a nice letter and says, welcome to Glasgow. Mm-hmm. Quite a lot of the online criticism that this organisation has faced is there's so many people on our streets, why don't we help our own first? But every single of my experiences with Refugee has been that it wasn't just refugees turning up when there was clothes to be given out, and that nobody would ever be turned away. The point is helping and not stopping your help.
That's correct, yeah. And I think an awful lot of people jump on board just because of the name. I think it's a wonderful name.
It is.
I've actually got a hoodie that says.
It's a fantastic organisation.
You know, it is. They do real fantastic work. And interestingly, going back to FMQs just quickly, there was a question asked about there was a homeless person that died in their tent. I think it was up by the Gallowgate and stuff like that. I think it was raised by a member of the Labour Party. You know, again, if, you know, they don't realise the fact that if they don't argue with us to stop mitigating all that we have to mitigate against, you know, the Tory austerity, then you know, we could actually address these situations. You know, I mean, it was Nicola that said, you know, that she, you know, one person on the streets is bad enough, let alone, you know, I don't know the actual figure, but, you know, just one person is just one person too much.
This is absolutely true, and I think it's also true for any political moves that the Scottish Government makes in terms of waiting for things to take place. I stay in Glasgow, and over a decade that I've known Glasgow, I've never seen more homeless people on the streets. I don't know if they would agree with waiting for decisions to be taken. I think we all need to have some sense of urgency about how we engage with our environment and what responsibility we have to the people of Scotland.
Yeah.
So on that note,
on that note, you want to wrap it up, and I just had one other thing just to say that there was a football team in England who actually opened up their stadium to homeless people.
Fantastic.
And I commented on Twitter about it, and I asked James Dornan who's the MSP for Cathcart. Wouldn't it be great if they could utilise Hampden for that? Because we only use Hampden about 12 times a year.
Yeah.
And the other times it's just used for corporate events. So when it's empty, could we not just open the room?
Good idea. Bring more of them the next time we see you. Thanks for being here, Chris.
No, thanks for having me once again.
Thanks for watching Scotland at 7, and we'll see you again the next time. Thank you.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.